Every year, the University Honors Program at Governor State hosts a community lecture series, and this is part of that community lecture series. We bring in speakers that speak to a common theme, and the theme this year is challenging structures, changing paradigms. And through the course of the last few months, we've been massaging that theme from different perspectives. When you look at challenging structures, you have to look at what is current, and when you look at changing paradigms, you have to look at what lays ahead. So immediately I thought of Mr. David Houle, a noted futurist. The beauty of futurists, in my day, it was Alvin Toffler, it was Future Shock, everybody was reading that, and he was looking at the impact of the rapidity of change on how we perceive our world today and in the future. Mr. Houle has taken many paths in looking at the future. Some of his books include his most current one is Entering the Shift Age, which has been a top seller on the Amazon list. The New Health Age, not the nuclear health, but the New Health Age. Given what is happening with the Affordable Care Act and so on, I'm sure that was a very interesting book, and he told me I have to read it. Shift Ed, that's short for Shift Education, a call for transforming K through 12 education. Futurists look at what is existent and they try to extrapolate from that into the future. And from that we can learn what to anticipate, maybe what to resist, and what to promote. So without further ado, this is David Houle.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to be here, and thank you all for coming out on a cold and snowy night, formerly snowy night, I guess. So I am a futurist. And people always say to me, oh, you're the first futurist I've ever met, or what does that mean? I define what I do as being a catalyst to get people, businesses, and the world to think about the future and then to facilitate a conversation about it. Because most people do not think about the future. They're busy making plans. You ask people what they think the future is, oh, well, let me tell you my plans. Or they think it's all bad. So I'm here to tell you that the future is not personal and that it's not bad. In fact, it's quite bright. The second part of that definition, facilitating a conversation about it. I'm going to talk here for somewhere around 75 minutes, maybe a little bit more. We're going to do this break thing for the hour segments. And then we'll have at least a half an hour for Q&A. So if you have any questions, and I'm going to be coming at you really hard with a lot of big concepts, just make a note of what it is you didn't quite understand, and then we'll come back to that, because I really love the Q&A. Now, the other thing is that I was told, and it's evidenced by looking at you all, that this would be a varied audience. Lots of times I teach corporate, go to corporate retreats, so I'm going into Boeing, and I know that I'm talking to aerospace, or I'm talking at an energy conference, or I'm talking at an education conference. So I kind of focus down into that. Not knowing the varied interests that would show up in the room, it's going to be much more broad-based. So the first part of this presentation is really the high-level context of where we, humanity, are at. And then the second part, and this is where I'm going to move really quickly, is a look, as the book says, the future in the shift age. And I'm going to go through all the topics. I was reviewing the PowerPoint this morning, realizing, well, I don't know what people might not be or might be interested in. So I'm going to go through it really fast, high level. So that's where you might want to take a note and go, what do you mean by that, right? And then we'll have time to talk. So you're looking at the guy who has said that we have left the information age and entered the shift age. And I will talk about that. But we heard the name Toffler. I stand on the shoulders of Alvin Toffler, Marshall McLuhan, and Buckminster Fuller, who were the great futurists of the last quarter century of the 20th century. And the reason I came up with the shift age was that I thought something different was happening. I started a blog 7 years ago called Evolution Shift. And I went back and I read those three great futurists, and they got kind of diffuse when they're talking about this century, right? Because they wrote in the 60s and the 70s, and they were dead on for the next 30 years. But it's really hard. If anybody tells you they know what's going to happen in 2050, don't believe them, right? You can project out. I think my sweet spot is about the next 10 to 15 years, and that's what I'm going to focus on. So back in 2007, I started saying there's this new age called the shift age. I started saying in 2007 that we were going to enter a 4 to 5 year reorganizational recession between leaving the information age and entering the shift age. And of course, that's what we're coming out of. And I've had hundreds of CEOs say to me, it was the context that allowed them to understand this disruptive thing that we've gone through economically. So I want to jump right into this. This is the name of my new book. It's just out. It came out in January. It's kind of like, I think, the book I'm going to be known for. By the way, the other thing I said when Larry introduced me, back in 2008, if you can remember how dark that was, Lehman Brothers going down, everything else, I was asked the question, what does it take for the United States to remain a great nation? And I found myself answering that question by saying, if we don't better educate our young, if we don't become healthier citizenry, and we don't completely rebuild the transportation, energy, and communications infrastructure in this country, it doesn't matter what else we do. And so you'll hear that theme. That's why I wrote the book, Shift Ed. That's why I wrote the book, The New Health Age, The Future of Healthcare in America. So now I'm back to the larger issues. So we have this TV screen. Usually there's a bigger screen. So there's no charts. The PowerPoints are pretty simple, and I'll talk about each of them. So if any of you are kind of blocked by that post or whatever, stay with me on this. So everybody in this room is the latest iteration of humanity called modern man. We're not Neanderthals, we're not Cro-Magnon, we're modern man. Modern man has been around for 150,000 years. And then 10,000 years, modern man literally put down roots and the agricultural age began. This is also the beginning of the concept of place, and it's also the beginning of any civilization you've ever heard of, and any religion you've ever heard of has come from this last 10,000 years. And then 300 years ago, with the introduction of the steam engine into the marketplace, the industrial age began. And then about 40 years ago, early 70s, arbitrarily, the information age began. So one thing you see here is the acceleration of ages. Now, when we move from one age to another, it doesn't mean the old age goes away. It's just a new layering of evolution. So for example, probably 15 miles from where I'm standing, somebody's growing something, somebody's manufacturing something, somebody's in a wired office. So it's just a new evolutionary step. Now, one of the things that everybody in this room has dealt with in their life, the older you are, the more you've had to process it, is the speed of change, right? So it's kind of interesting when you look at this. So for the sake of easy math, if a lifetime is 50 years, clearly we live longer than that now. There's some gray hairs in the room that attest to that. But centuries and millennia ago, we didn't. So if a lifetime is 50 years, then 150,000 years, the time we modern man have been on this planet, is 3,000 lifetimes. 10,000 years is 200 lifetimes. So for the 3,000 lifetimes that modern man has been on this planet, literally 2,800 of them, we lived in caves. 200 of them, we created all the great civilizations and religions of the world. 6 of them, we created all the wonders of the industrial age. In one generation, we created the information age. And this is an arbitrary date. There's no set time for the shift age, but I think it was around this time, in the middle to latter third of the first decade of this century. So that's where we are. And this is an incredible inflection point in history. Everybody in this room is incredibly blessed to be alive at the most transformative time in recorded history. Why? A new millennium, clearly, a new century, a new age, which I will shortly define, and a new decade. Again, I gave this the decade its name, Transformation Decade, 2010 to 2020. Now, if anybody in history, if you go back in history, there's been a new millennium and a new century, but not also a new age and not also a really rapidly changing decade. So this is unique. So in 2013, we are a little bit more than 1% through this new millennium. The last time that sentence could be said was the year 1013. Vikings ruled the seas. Depth of the Dark Ages in Europe. So if you accept an easily acceptable supposition that the speed of change is 10 times faster than it was in the depth of the Dark Ages, then all of the change that humanity has experienced in the last 1,000 years will be replicated in the next 100. If you accept this futurist's suggestion that the speed of change is 100 times faster than the depth of the Dark Ages when the Vikings ruled the seas, then all the amount of change that we had in the last millennium will happen in the next 10 years. Now, some of that may come up against some minor laws of physics, but without question, all of the change of the last 1,000 years will be replicated in the next 10 to 100 years. So it's an incredibly transformative time to be alive. Every age has characteristics that define it, that shape it. And you know, when you think of the three that I just had up there, all around a product: agriculture, manufacturing, or information. And I believe that the age that we're now in is not a product age, but it's a completely transformative age. So the word shift came up to me. When my first book came out, The Shift Age, in 2007, it was the only nonfiction book on Amazon with the word shift in it. I went back there a couple of weeks ago, and there's something like 54, right? So I was right about that use of the word. And the other thing is that I knew that it would be very disruptive. So has anybody here been in an earthquake? Raise your hand. Where were you?
29 Palms, California.
Okay. So was it the 94 or the 89?
It was 2000.
Oh, okay. It's a recent one. Who else raised their hand? Where were you?
Well, I was in that 89.
At the 89.
84, 86.
Right, yeah, California, right. So, okay, mine was a 94, you know, the Norwich one, Northridge one. And the reason I'm asking you is that anybody that raised their hand with that, you remember that as though it was yesterday, right? It was just like, you know, you're having a conversation, and all of a sudden the earth moves, and this thing called your life goes up in smoke, you know, the drum of your life, because there's a bigger force. That's the highest metaphor for the shift age. If you think you're standing on solid ground, if you think you're certain about things, I promise you that within 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, you're going to wake up and go, what happened? Well, I was so busy being certain, right? That's what the shift age is. So then I thought, okay, so what are the characteristics of the shift age? And I came up with these three fundamental forces that I think, if you reflect, any change in your life, anything that's happened or is happening, can be traced back to one of these three forces, and I call them flows. The first is the flow to global, for those of you in the back. We're getting organized under a global construct, but it's more than the global economy. Everything is going global. In fact, we're in the global stage of human evolution. We've gone from family to tribe to village to city-state to nation-state, and our only remaining boundaries are now planetary. So the word globalization is no longer just an economic term. It is the word describing what will happen in almost every aspect of human society over the next 15, 20 years. So everything is getting organized around all of us, around the integration. We are in the global stage of human evolution. So we are moving in that direction in every single category. And you know, some obvious examples, you know, we know the economy is, but culture, right? Gangnam Style, right? Everybody's seen that video. Second-rate pop star from South Korea has 1 billion hits. That is global culture. For 20 years ago, we'd never heard of the guy. First of all, there wasn't YouTube, and there weren't the cameras and technologies to do it. So everything is getting organized around the global construct. At the same time is this flow to the individual. This has occurred because over the last 4 decades, there's been an explosion of choice, which means that the power has moved from the producer to the consumer, from the institution to the individual. So we as individuals have more power than individuals have ever had before. Explosion of choice, multiple ways to read books, listen to music, watch TV, brands of toothpaste. So as you know, it used to be, there's a few gray hairs in the room that remember, I grew up in the south side of Chicago. When the TV set came into the home, there were 3 channels, and they weren't on 24 hours. And what did I have to do, right? If I was sitting on the sofa over here, and the TV was over there, and I wanted to change the channel, some of you young people won't believe this. I had to, yeah, good, you just read your history, right? Get up, turn over, turn the channel, and walk back down, right? Every single time. In fact, I've spoken to numerous groups where a 40-year-old would raise their hand and go, yeah, I was the remote control. Honey, would you go change the channel, please? Right? Oh, okay. So now I control that whole thing called the world of television with my thumb. So look what happened. It went from this appliance over here, controlling all the physical activity in the room, to me controlling that whole universe with my thumb. That's the easiest metaphor to grasp the power has flowed to us. So we've got to organize around all of us and each of us. And both of these forces are accelerated and amplified and powered by the single greatest force at play in the planet today, and one of the 2 or 3 greatest in human history, which is the accelerating electronic connectedness of the planet. Think about that. I mean, back in 2008, remember, it was dark, and I'm very optimistic, as you will see, about the future. So particularly, I was talking to a lot of CEO groups at that time, and they would say, well, you know, you're so optimistic. What about fundamental Islam, right? You know, what about those dictators? And I said in 2008 and 2009 that within 3 to 5 years, there would be upheaval in most dictatorships and in most autocratic Islamic states because of the accelerated connectedness of the planet. Now, I didn't know to call it Arab Spring because I didn't know what happened in the spring. But the 2 common denominators of every single country in Arab Spring, one, accelerated electronic connectedness, right? Facebook and Twitter were the tools of revolution. And the second is 45 to 55% of the population of every single one of those countries is under the age of 25. 40% of the population of Iraq is under the age of 16. So you take young people connectedness and you have the Arab Spring, okay? So this is really profound. And let me give you some numbers. And again, I'm moving quickly here because I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. So there are 7 billion, now almost 7.1 billion people on the planet. And guess what? 5.6 billion people have cell phones. Okay? So you take away the people really, really young and the people in the Himalayas and the Andes, and you have cell phone ubiquity. Now, what does this mean? First of all, what is it? What's your name? What? Brittany? Okay, so Brittany is like 5 feet away from me, right? So if I had your cell phone number, don't turn it on. If I had your cell phone number, I'd call your phone, you know, 1, 1000, 2, 1000, 3, 1000. 5 seconds, Brittany's phone would ring. You go, so, right? 5 seconds, 10 feet apart, 10 feet apart. If I were to call China 12,000 miles away, maybe another 2 seconds because of the relay of the satellite. So what this means is the difference between 10 feet and 12,000 miles is 2 seconds. So for the first time in human history, it can be said there is no time or distance limiting human communication. That's a profound statement. It couldn't be said 5 years ago, let alone 10 or 25. Now, question to the room. I've asked this question 500 plus times, and I've always gotten the correct answer. So it's a universal question. Question to the room. If you are talking on your cell phone to somebody else on the cell phone after, hey, how you doing? And can you hear me okay? What's one of the next questions you will ask?
Where are we?
Exactly. Where are you? So there's no time, distance, or place any longer limiting human communication. So we get absorbed in the shiny new objects of our time called technology, but it is what technology is doing that we are not even aware of evolutionarily that is changing the paradigm, to use the theme here. So there's no time, distance, or place limiting human communication. What this thing has also done is brought economic leverage to the third world for the first time. You know, I hear stories, everybody in this room has heard stories about, oh, I was on a safari in Africa and my guide got a phone call. Or I'm in the, you know, I was in a shanty town with no indoor electricity outside Johannesburg, and they all had cell phones. Here's a fact that relates to infrastructure. Electricity kind of came into the marketplace 133 years ago, 30 years ago for the cell phone. There's more people who have cell phones than in-home electricity in this planet because of the cellular infrastructure. So say I'm a villager in sub-Saharan Africa, right? For years, for decades, me and my parents have done what we've always done, is take our craft goods, our agricultural goods to the next big city and go, what do you pay me? Well, you're going to lowball me because you know you're my only option. Oh, this is all I could get, sorry, right? Now I got a cell phone. So I'm going to call the 3 biggest cities around me. What do you pay me? What do you pay me? What do you pay me? Oh, you'll pay me? You get my business. Economic leverage. I could go on for that for a long time. So the cell phone is the single most transformative device that on the planet. By the way, this screen, you know, but depending on who you listen to, you know, 2.25 to 3 billion people who access the internet. Most of them do it on this. There's only 2 billion people who have computers. So this is the screen of the future. We live in a broadband world. I use that term. I know it's an old term, but I like it because it's the bandwidth is ever expanding, which means that we now have 2 realities we have to manage. The physical reality that we grew up in, and the older ones in the room, our parents completely lived in, and we lived in, you know, when we grew up. I've had conversations recently with people my age who have the same conversation. You know, I got home from school, I just went out and played. When it was time for dinner, Mom would ring a bell, right? So, I mean, I guess that was a common experience in the 50s and 60s, right? And so that's the physical reality. But now you have a screen reality that you have to manage. And depending on who you are and how old you are and what you do, that screen reality is every bit, if not more compelling than the physical reality. If you're a 16-year-old and you're going to high school, how you show up tonight on Facebook is every bit important as how you show up tomorrow in high school. Or if you're a trader. Now, I've been talking about this for 5 years, and now, you know, the issue is, you know, the physical reality is based on atoms. The screen reality is based on digits. And digits can evolve much faster. So now we see the reality of the screen reality, affecting the physical reality. Because, you know, we see Best Buys closing down and Barnes & Noble's closing down these big box stores. Why? Because of Amazon.com, right? So this screen reality is now going into the physical reality and changing it faster and faster and faster. I'll touch upon that later, obviously. So 2012, last year, I correctly predicted this. Fortunately, it's one of my correct, that this is the first year that more mobile computing devices are sold than non-mobile devices, computing devices. Last year, the total global market growth in PCs was 0.6%, which means in 2013, for the first year since the PC came online, the numbers will shrink. Tablets, laptops, smartphones, okay? And that was 700 million computing devices sold last year that were mobile. And from now on, for those that can't see in the bottom, 2013 to 2016, $1 billion plus a year. Right? And we all know, okay, so, you know, this is an iPhone 4. I mean, I may be a futurist, but I still got a contract going on, right? So, I got more computing device in my hand than Apollo 13. I got more computing device in my hand than NASA had when Glenn orbited the planet. So not only are they exploding in number, but the power of the computing. I hold, you know, I went to work when I got out of college at University of Chicago, and they had a 360, 165 mainframe computer. This is more powerful than that. Right? And we had to wait in line, and you walked into this room that was about this big, and it was air conditioned to 60 degrees, and the religious clerics around the machine wore white lab coats. They were called computer operators, and then there were systems analysts and programmers, and now all of you do this on your phones. Okay? I mean, so that just puts it in historical perspective. So now, so everybody, some of you might be too young to remember the significance of this, but remember New Year's Eve, 1999 to 2000? Remember that?
Y2K.
Yeah, Y2K, right, exactly. But the conversation was, what are you going to do with New Year's Eve? It's a new millennium, right? Well, the new millennium was 2000 to 2001, right? Because 2000 was the end of the first one, and 2001 was the beginning of the next one. But we're so odometer oriented that when 4 digits roll over, it's got to be something significant, right? Same mindset occurred in December of 2009. And I was on a writing retreat in Florida. And you know, whenever I stopped writing and I'd turn on mainstream media, what's this new decade going to be? And I wanted to scream, it's not a new decade yet. You got another year, folks. But, you know, I couldn't win that argument. So as a futurist, I threw in the towel and I decided to get ahead of the parade, right? So on 0110, interesting digital date, by the way, right? By the way, 2010 and 2011 We're the way we shorten dates, you know, like 2, 2, and 2, they're the only 2 digital years for the next 100, like 01, 01, 10, or 11, 11, 11, things like that. Anyway, on 01, 01, 10, I wrote a blog post, and I called it the Transformation Decade. And it blew up in the blogosphere, blew up in the Twitter. More retweets than I'd ever had from China, from Germany. Houle calls it the Transformation Decade. Here's the dictionary definition of transformation: a change in nature, in form, appearance, nature, or character. Simple, very simple. But what that means, and the reason I called it that, was this is the decade where most of humanity's institutions and thought will change their nature, shape, character, and form. So when I talk to CEOs, I say to them, if you don't change the nature, shape, character, and form of your company, you may not have a company by 2020. If this university doesn't change its nature, shape, and character form, then it may not be a functional entity in 2020. So that's why this is so transformative. And, you know, transformation is not I wrote, for about a year, I wrote on Oprah.com, and this was the first blog post they wanted, because she's about transformation, changing lives, right? But she does it in a higher level. So this is also the decade of the collapse of legacy thinking. That's my term, okay? Schumpeter called it creative destruction. I call it legacy thinking because the United States of America and the developed countries of the world, obviously exemplified by Washington, D.C., have powered into the 21st century with the legacy thoughts of the 20th. And we're wondering why things don't work. The older you are, the more your thoughts were shaped and formed in the 20th century. The younger you are, the more 21st century you are. So this is the decade when it's going to collapse because it doesn't work anymore. You know, if your business mentor said to you in 1990, I'm talking to the older folks in the room, this is the way it is, or you said, oh, my dad told me. Whatever thought came in that got fixed as your perception of the realness of the world, and it was 1990, 1985, 1997, what makes you think it's valid in 2013? Because if you hold on to legacy thoughts, this is the way it is, right? Then the metaphor is you're standing in a house built in the past, looking out through small windows into the present, not even seeing the future, because your legacy thinking is keeping you from seeing what's going on. Now, I forecast in 2007, 2 things I forecast in 2007. Early in 2007, I said the presidential election in 2012, not knowing who was going to be a candidate and who was going to be in office, would be between those that wanted to take us back to a time that was more comfortable, recognizable in the way it should be, versus those that wanted to face the future and go forward. Now, Romney obviously exemplified the former, right? Let's go back to pre-birth control. Let's go back, you know, the whole thing, right? I mean, the only demographic he won is white guys over the age of 45. Obama didn't do a very good job of articulating the future at all, because he knew he could win, because the data showed 99-1, 99-1, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But the concept here is that this is when legacy thinking is going to fall away. That's what I see going on. So that's a filter that this futurist looks at when I see all this disruption. You know, it's just the falling away. A 4-year institution for college is not with no online and is not $200,000 a year. And the way Washington runs, you know, it drives me nuts. I gave a speech last week in Vegas, and the only guy called the chief economist of the Fed spoke right before me. And he showed all these recessions from the 80s and the 90s as a justification for why this one was so bad, and, you know, by inference, Obama was not doing a very good job economically. And it's like I wanted to scream, I'm sorry, that was the 1980s. There wasn't a global economy. There was the Soviet Union. There wasn't climate change. How can you possibly relate something of the last century before this century as evidence that something in this century is not right? I mean, it's just backward thinking. Sorry, so this is the decade where there'll be a collapse of legacy thinking, which means that, and this is a big concept, this is the first decade of 21st century thought. This is the first decade. It's the second decade numerically, obviously, but it is the first decade of 21st century thought, because legacy thinking is falling away. We're starting to think in new ways. We're starting to think new things. An example, a way to prove this simply, is if I say 20th century to you, right? 20th century. Whatever comes to mind, century of science, American century, century of World War, began with 1914 to 1918. Obviously, World War I, Russian Revolution, general theory of relativity, the map of Europe as we know it was largely set. Unfortunately, Europeans set the map of the Middle East at that point. So all the storylines as we look back on the 20th century really began in that second decade. Because before that, we were a bucolic, isolationist country, largely rural. There was Victorian England, the 400 families of the social register in New York, and all got blown up. So future historians, say 100 years from now, can look back and go, oh, this is the decade where they really started thinking 21st century thought. That's why it's such a great time to be alive. Particularly looking at the youngest ones in the room, you get to think 21st century thought. It is your responsibility to think 21st century thought. Because older people kind of go, yeah, I kind of accept it, or I'm open to change, but here's where I kind of hold on to my values, because they were shaped, right? So I wrote a blog. In fact, it's the current one. I won't go into it too much because you can go to it. It's evolutionshift.com. And it was all about the Hegel nomination, right? Because here's an example. The Defense Department was formed in 1947. So in 1947, we had just beat fascism, and now we were facing communism. So the mission of the Defense Department in 1947 was, we're going to create a military as a nation state that can club any other nation state military into submission, thinking Soviet Union. Okay, so that went away. There's no nation state in the world that wants to get involved with us militarily. Our threats are cyber threats, cyber attacks, and terrorism. I think that's one of the reasons we invaded Iraq. Because the whole mindset, the legacy thinking of the military-industrial complex, and specifically represented by the Defense Department, we were attacked. First time we've been attacked since Pearl Harbor. We got to find a nation that kicks some butt, right? I mean, we went into Iraq. Now, I didn't see any evidence that Iraq attacked the Twin Harbors, did you? I mean, Twin Towers, did you? But we had to come up with a nation state because, oh, legacy thinking, right? That's just an example. So the Hegel nomination was all about that. Who was the poster child of the military-industrial complex in the Senate? Anybody want to shout it out? John McCain, aside from being a real sore loser, So I mean, because Hegel and his boss, President Obama, are clear. It's time for a 21st century Defense Department. The problem, I don't have any problem with this sequestration. I mean, come on. How else would $40 billion get cut from the Defense Department, right? So, I mean, it's slightly a personal view, but I'm using that as an example. So, now, usually with this slide, I'm talking to CEOs who I've made really nervous by this point, okay? So I want to calm them down, and I want to give them the qualities on how to lead and succeed their companies in the transformation decade. I'm going to shorten, because this is when they all take notes, because this is like the executional stuff I give to CEOs so they know how to run their company. I'm going to do less of that and more kind of stay at the high conceptual level with all of you. So what are the qualities of leadership and management, or leading your family, leading your institution, leading your friends, and managing your own lives that you need to have in abundance and amplify to be successful in this decade? The first is adaptability. You have to be adaptable, okay? Now, the best example I could give of this is I spoke to a group of 15 CEOs, February 2009, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. For those of you that tracked, what that means to you is South Florida, one of the epicenters of the residential real estate meltdown in this country. So I always go around the room and ask the CEOs, so what do you do? First guy I asked that morning said, I'm the CEO of a construction company. So because it was 2009 South Florida, I said, so how you doing? He says, I think I'm going to have to declare bankruptcy. Why? Because I build residential homes and nobody's buying. Gee, sorry to hear that. Went around the room. The last guy also said, I'm the CEO of a construction company. So because of the first conversation, I asked him, so how are you doing? He said, actually, I'm doing great. I used to be in residential housing, but that market shifted away from me because of macroeconomic conditions. So now I'm in infrastructure and I'm doing great. So one guy, two people, both guys, defined themselves as being CEO of construction companies. And one went out of business because he allowed himself to define his business by the market he had always served. This guy said, this market is no longer serving me. I got to find another market. So the headline is, be adaptable in whatever you do between now and 2020. And the subset is, and this may be less appropriate here, but for business people, I go, never define your company by the market you have always served. What do? Well, we serve the small to medium-sized, whatever it is, right? Well, if you're defining yourself by what you've always done, it may not be a good definition for what you will be doing. You got to develop the quality of resilience. It's not always going to be fun out here. Now, here's a metaphor, and I'm going to stay with the corporate metaphor because it makes sense. Most companies, most institutions have management hierarchies, reporting structures. Problem with structures, reporting structures, they become solidified, calcified, and they become bureaucracies, and bureaucracies are resistant to change. The definition of a bureaucracy is to maintain itself, right? So what's the metaphor of the 20th century? High-rise, verticality, problems, silos. And that's why people are in too many meetings, because everything goes up and goes across and comes down. We've all been in, those of us in business have all been in too many meetings. Why? Well, she's a director and I shouldn't be a director. I should be in that meeting. No. What's the metaphor for the 21st century? The net, right? So most of you, probably the young ones haven't, but the older ones have, seen the movie Top Gun, right? Tom Cruise. So the plane comes in on the aircraft carrier, slows down to 140 miles an hour, hits the aircraft carrier, and within 40 yards, it's enveloped by this whole net that absorbs the complete physics of the plane as it's coming in, right? And stops and it's towed away. So so the net is the metaphor for the 21st century. So I say to CEOs, I know, almost verbatim, I know you can't do this. Start thinking metaphorically as your management, your departments as nodes of a net. So there's the finance node, the marketing node, the R&D node, the manufacturing node, the sales node. So the question becomes, what modalities need to be in this meeting? And at what level of the modalities? And then, of course, there's the CEO or the chancellor node here. Because what we know, and the younger you are, you experience this even more, is the speed with which things moves across a net rather than up and down vertical hierarchies, right? So increasingly in whatever you do, you're going to have more resilience the more way you think of the net as a metaphor. I'm going to come back to this when I talk about women in the future. Collaborative ongoing reorganization. Now again, this is where I would dig down deep with corporations, and I won't here because there's so much I want to cover with you. But it used to be, Peter Drucker, one of my greats, right? He came up with the management guru, bar none, right? He came up with the concept of managing by walking around, meaning the CEO should leave the CEO suite and go down to the shop floor, walk around and go, how you doing? Any ideas? How you doing? Oh, good, I get your feedback. Let me go back and cogitate on that for a few months and I'll let you know my decision. That's not collaborative, that's dictatorial, right? So it has to be collaborative. If there's 500 people in a company, everybody has to be involved in any kind of ongoing reorganization. The other thing you have to do is you have to stop thinking about titles and start thinking about qualities. So if if there's some entity, Governor State University, that wants to increase innovation, you don't get together some people and whiteboard, okay, so how do we increase innovation? Because that's oxymoronic, because if those people who are running the institution have to figure out how to increase innovation, and they're the one, they've already failed, right? So the thing to do if you want to increase innovation, using that as an example, is close your eyes and go, Who is the most innovative employee that shows up every day? Could be the mailroom guy. Could be the woman that runs the cafeteria. Well, you know, I just decided to do it differently. Oh, okay, you're the first person on the innovation committee because you're showing up at the highest quality that we want to build in the rest of the organization. So you lead by example. So it's collaborative and it's ongoing. You can't just make a change and go, okay, good, I'm done this year, right? Doesn't have to be every day, doesn't have to be every month, but if you're running any kind of an organization or you're in any kind of group and you're not kind of reorganizing it and collaborating in that, you're going to fall behind. Competitively, behind your competition, certainly behind the market, certainly by the rest of humanity, if I'm right about this. So, this is very important. The younger ones in the room won't understand this experientially as much as the older ones in the room. When I grew up, authority was institutional. Why do people my age brush our teeth with Crest toothpaste? Oh, the American Dental Association said so. Why did my mother buy something with the good housekeeping seal of approval? Oh, that's institutional acceptability. Now it's personal. I don't care what you say to me, Mr. University executive or Mr. Restaurateur. I'm going to ask my friends, have you ever been to the restaurant? So that's what social media is. It's personal authority. You ask your friends first, right? You go on Facebook. Does anybody know anything about this? You don't like respond to the ad. I work with a market research firm here in Chicago, and they did one study, and then a year later, 1.5 to 1 ratio and 2 to 1 ratio of believability in consumer-generated content over corporate or institutional-generated content. So, for example, standing here, the best way to increase enrollment in this institution is to have the students here tell everybody how good a place it is, rather than put out ever more ads, because those ads are going to be, you know, not listened to. They're going to go, who do I know at Governor State so I can find out how good it is, right? So it's a very significant shift. Power has gone personal rather than institutional. Vision. I'm obviously vision-driven. I'm a futurist, right? Now, so again, I have to say, I usually talk to corporations and retreats or CEOs. And they say, well, here's our strategic plan. Isn't it cool? We got a 3-year plan. We got a 5-year plan. They put it in a binder and put it up on the shelf. You know, and the plan usually says, we're going to have 6.7 incremental growth in our EBITDA every year. Oh, that's really empowering for me to come to work, right? So it's 2013, I say to these executives, tell me what your vision is of the company over here in 2018, and then work back. Be vision-driven. What is this institution going to look like in 2018? Answer that question. And then everything else gets filled in working back. The classic example, those of you that are as old as me can remember, this was John Kennedy, March 1961, right? By the end of this decade, we will get a man on the moon and safely bring him home. So end of the decade, that's far out. Okay, we can probably do that. And what happened? July 69, we did it. But at the time, NASA freaked out, right? Because we just put Shepard up in space for 90 minutes. How are we going to? So what they did was they went to the vision. Okay, by 1969, we'll probably need 3 people. So we're going to have to do 3 people. And we'll probably have to do a couple of runs before we dare to go down. So then we'll do that. And then we'll work back. And then we'll have 3 people orbiting the planet up in space for the length of time it will take. And then we work back and they work back, right? So the best and the brightest of NASA saw the vision and then parsed it back. So for example, what's today's date? March 6th, right? So if I was talking to a group of CEOs, I'd go, don't you dare look at your actuals of February 2013 and compare them to the actuals of February 2012. Instead, look at your actual business performance for February 2013 and compare it to what it has to be in February 2014 if you want to get to your vision. Now, when I say that, and I've spent some time on this slide, light bulbs go off, right? Oh, God, yeah, right, sure. Why did I keep looking back? You know? So, and finally, what I say to corporations again, and I'll use this as an institution, is what is the metaphor of all this? It's being a morph corp. The definition of morphing is the active definition of transformation, changing one's nature, shape, character, and form. So be a morph corp. Google is a morph corp, right? Apple is a morph corp. Apple, 1999, Apple Computer Corporation, 2.5% share of the North American market. Now it's Apple Inc., the #1 consumer brand on the planet, let alone market cap, and it's all about consumer electronics. Or Google, right? Typical legacy thinking. Wall Street Journal 3 years ago did an editorial on their editorial page going, when Google announced they're going into energy because they use so much energy in their server farms, I think it's not smart for Google to step outside their core competency of search. I'm sorry. The core competency of Google is innovation. Google Energy, driverless cars, the Google Glass. Do I have to keep going? Right? So be a morph corp, be a morph institution. So now I want to take you into the future in the shift age with these contexts as the larger thing. Another way of saying it metaphorically is that people who are in institutions, people who run things, tend to look at the future inside out. Right? I'm in this institution called Governors State University. So how does the future look through that portal? And what I try to show with what I've just done is that there are outside-in forces that will affect Governors State University more than the inside-out vision, which is the purpose I try to serve as a futurist, is to lift people up out of their context, the day-to-day context. Now I'm going to, as I said, go hyper fast, because I didn't know what this room wanted, so I'm putting it all in. I'm just going to go through it. So if you just write a word and put a question mark, and I'll come back to it, okay? So when I wrote my first book, The Shift Age, most of us in this room have heard the true cliche of the information age: content is king. It's true, but it's a cliche because everybody says it. The cliche of the shift age is context is king. We live in an ever more contextual world. Simple low-level example: if Obama and the House Republicans do something, here are the metrics. But if you watch that story reported on Fox News, the context is entirely different than if you watch it on MSNBC. So the context trumps the content. We live in a much more contextual world. There were studies done out of University of Michigan 5 or 6 years ago where they took American Caucasians and they took Chinese, and they showed them pictures. Like, for example, there's a picture of a tiger surrounded by the jungle. The Americans said, oh, that's a picture of a tiger. The Chinese spoke about the jungle because they've grown up much more contextually. Now that we're all global, we're becoming much more of a contextual world. So therefore, in this new book, for me as a writer, the really big intellectual property breakthrough for me was to say, okay, so what are the contexts through which everything in the future will be looked at? So all of the stuff I'm about to talk to after this page is going to be viewed through one of these 5 contexts. The first one is the Earth century. We live in the Earth century. Now, this first came up for me. It was a blog post I wrote. I started writing my blogs, I said, 7 years ago. I came to be known as a thought leader about alternative and renewable energy. And I remember it was the trip I was telling you about later. So it was March, right? Earth Day is like April 20th or 22nd, depending on when it falls, on a Saturday, right? And around March, because I write this blog, I started getting these posts. Oh, you might want to feature this product, this LEED certified building, or this recyclable thing, or this on your Earth Day blog post. And I got so mad that I wrote a column called The Earth Century. It's not Earth Day, it's not Earth Week, it's not Earth Month, it's not Earth Year. It might be Earth Decade, but it's the Earth Century we live in. So don't try and think of it as a marketing tentpole. It's no longer true. There's I'm blanking on his name, sorry, Dutch scientist, got the Nobel Prize. In 2000, he came up with the phrase, the Anthropocene age, because he felt that humanity had changed the planet enough. Anthropocene means human. So we live in the human age. In other words, humanity with its biomass and its intrusion on the planet is the single most powerful force on the earth today, as ice was on the ice age. So we live in the Earth century, the Anthropocene age. It is up to us. This is a filter that will start increasingly affect all of our thinking. Subset of that, Fuller came up with the phrase spaceship Earth. McLuhan came up with the name spaceship Earth. McLuhan came up with the great quote: "There are no passengers on spaceship Earth. We are all crew." So we are all crew on this very unique spaceship. Increasingly, everything is going to be viewed through that. In other words, unlimited business growth, as we've always known it, is only going to be acceptable if it's increasingly sustainable. So sustainable growth and unlimited and growth itself are going to become more congruent in definition. By 2025, if a company has not thought through sustainability and everything else, it's not going to be allowed to put something out. In fact, and this is something I'm going to develop for a future meme, if you will, I think by 2025 the word new is going to be a bad 4-letter word. Reused, recycled, right? You know, if something is new, it's drawing out resources. So unless you can show that you're replenishing it, we're not allowed you to, you know, new improved has been the motor for the American capitalism. New, improved, new. No. Why didn't you improve it the first time, first of all? And second of all, it can't be new, right? This is a really powerful concept. I see it everywhere. So in the 20th century, we quadrupled our population. Humanity went from 1.5 to 6 billion people. Never in human history have we quadrupled the population in a century. So imagine this. The metaphor I can come up with, imagine if photography has existed since the year 1000. So on January 1st, 1000, say standing right here, snapshot was taken. January 1st, 1100, 1200, 1300, 1400, maybe 1800. Oh, there's some people around. Oh, there's some people in boats on the river here. January 1900, oh, okay, horse and buggy. Oh, there's a train over there. January 1st, 2000, we've paved the planet. Think what we did in the 20th century. Internal combustion engine, air travel, skyscrapers, interstate highway. We in the United States have taken the definition of transportation equals internal combustion engine. Does anybody think that that's going to be that's going to be that way in 2100? So think about the concept of legacy thought. This building was built in the 20th century. So whenever you're in a space that affects your thinking, like if you're out in the beauty of nature, your mind opens up. If you're in a small place, your mind closes down. So here we are trying to undo the legacy thinking of the 20th century in structures created in the 20th century. It's doubly difficult. So I look at everybody young today here, those young people in the room, you've got to break it. You've got to think 21st century thought. You have to figure out how to retrofit the 20th century. I flew into Vegas last week, and I'm flying into New York next week, and I've flown into Sao Paulo, and I've flown into Rio, and I've flown into, Hong Kong, and not so much Hong Kong, but you're looking out the window, and it's mile after mile after mile after mile of stuff that is not sustainable, makes no sense at all, and it's all built up. How do we, as a species, retrofit everything that has been wrought in the 20th century and move forward? It's a challenge. I look to the young people in the room. It's a challenge you have to solve that humanity has never had to deal with. 1900, we have these paths that are, for horse and buggy. Oh, we'll just pave them over and put a car. Can't do that anymore, right? I have to rip it up. What do we do? How do we when oil is no longer available in the 2040s, we better figure out what the interstate system is, right? Okay, so the concept of place has changed forever. I'm just going to go through this real quickly. On my website, davidhoule.com, there's a TEDx talk I did on 12-12-12 in Sarasota when this is the name of it. Remember, no time, distance, or place because of the cell phone. Prior to that, every single human alive has been completely controlled by placeness. Nobody in this room chose your parents, which means nobody in this room chose where you were raised. And how significant is that, right? It's really significant. California, right? South, Hyde Park, around there, right? It's an identity thing. In other words, it's one of the most stupid ways to start a conversation, right? You're getting on the plane. For me, I haven't put on my noise reduction headset yet, or I'm sitting in a resort after dinner, about ready to sit down and look out at the sunset with a nice drink, and somebody comes up to me and go, "Oh, where are you from?" Oh, God. But how real is that? Because it is so powerful. If you're from Boston, you think differently than if you're from Johannesburg. Okay? But now the concept of place is starting to go away in one of the most singularly important things that humans do, communication. So it's only going to expand out from there. In the TED Talk, I use the example of the Roman Empire. Anybody here not ever heard of that, right? And we've also heard of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. So I put up, you can see it in the PowerPoint. I put it up. So the Roman Empire, a little bit BC, 476 AD. And we say it declined and fell because, told you I'd talk about history, because it just kind of imploded on itself. At the same time of the Roman Empire, there were two great dynasties in China, and the Mayan civilization all coexisted. But because of the distance, because of the separation, they never interacted. Think of what happens today. 24 hours, we know everything's going on in China, right? What happened? What would have happened in history if the Roman Empire had interacted with the Mayan Empire and the dynasties of China? Be a different history altogether. So everybody in this room is part of the first iteration of humanity that is moving from placeness to spaceness, right? Because we all go to a place that is now called cyberspace. So, and I'll talk about the generation shortly. If you're born since 1997, you're a digital native. I'll come to that. But the young people today have the first generation in human history to grow up in a global space. That is a game changer consciousness-wise. Biology and technology merge. You will see this in almost every single sector. In 2000, if I said biology, oh, that's nature. If I said technology, oh, that's human-driven. Now we got ionics in our bodies. We got biological chips in computers. It's going to merge. By 2025, is it human or is it technology? Whatever it is, or biodegradable computers, things like that. So that's the fourth. And the last one, and this really started my journey as a futurist, an evolutionary shift in consciousness. What do I call my blog? Evolution Shift. What is my name on Twitter? Anybody that's on Twitter, please follow me, @Evolution Shift. I believe that all this stuff that I'm talking about, we've created this neurosphere, this cyberspace. This neurosphere is this synaptic, pulsating, ever-growing amalgamation of all our knowledge and everything we know and everything that we do, is a technological model for a new consciousness that I think is going to come into being in the 2020s. And I'm going to give you some evidence of that. But in other words, if you look at a 3-year-old for whom all content has always been on touchscreens, they will have a different consciousness than somebody who's going, is it a book or is it an ebook, is it a DVD or is it streaming or whatever it is, right? It's all connected. It's pulsating. It's synaptic. So these are the 5 contexts that any one of them one of these will affect anything I'm about to say. So, shift age generations. I talk about this a lot. In fact, I was at a conference in San Diego just about a month ago. And the sole purpose they wanted me, David Houle, Futurist, they'd heard me speak a couple of times at regional conferences, the Club Managers Association of America. And they wanted me to talk about this. Why? Because they represent country clubs. Now, I'm going to ask anybody in their 20s, so what country club are you thinking of joining? Right? I mean, give me a break. It's a 20th century, at best, if not a 19th century business model. So they're in deep trouble. So they asked me to talk about this. There are 2 shift age generations. The millennials, those born from 1981, somewhat arbitrary, to 1997, somewhat arbitrary, based on socioeconomic and country. Okay? Generally speaking, sometimes people cut it off 2001. I see it differently. The millennials come of age in this millennial. Who's in their 20s? Raise your hand. Okay, you're millennials. You are the leaders of the shift age. There will be a millennial president, certainly by the 2030s. And there is a war going on in this country, in the workplace, between baby boomer bosses and millennials. The baby boomer bosses think the millennials is really entitled and show up and want to make a difference right away, right? Well, I'm sorry, baby boomers, let me ask you the question. How did you raise your kids? Right? Right? Participation ribbons, everybody gets a trophy, everybody gets to play, and then you turn around and you wonder why they're so entitled, right? I went out on the south side of Chicago on a beautiful fall day when I was 13 years old. I went out to try out for the freshman soccer team. Guy with the whistle around his neck, right? You know, typical macho phys ed guy says, okay, I want to thank all 33 of you for coming out today. I really appreciate it. The problem is, I only have 18 uniforms, so 15 of you are not going to make the team. Any of you who raised your hand, did you ever hear that growing up? Yeah. You did? Really? Okay, so you know, you guys are largely different. But most millennials haven't heard that. Oh, we'll just have 2 teams. Everyone can play, right? The difference is the millennials are more connected and they get things done faster. And by the way, baby boomers, as I was saying to Larry in his office today, if you graduated from college, as my son did in 2009 or 2010 or 2011 or 2012, and you graduated into this recession, what generation brought it about? It's a baby boomer global recession. Look at all the pictures of the bankers. They're all baby boomers. The baby boom brought this on, not the millennials, not the Gen Xers. So this is a baby boom catastrophe. So why should the millennials respect this? Oh, you want me to buy into this? Oh, I got it. Oh, buy a home, right? Oh, that makes a lot, because I'll make a lot of money buying a home, right? Okay. So they are going to be the leaders of the shift age, and it's the digital natives that really fascinate me. 1997 to present. Why digital natives? They are the first generation for whom the digital landscape is native. Everybody older than them is a digital immigrant. I'm a digital immigrant. Anybody with gray hair in this room or approximate age is a digital immigrant because you were an adult before you got your first cell phone. You were an adult before you get your first computer. These digital natives, they come into it with a computer in the home, with cell phone, with everything. So one of the questions I get asked is, how do you deal with information overload, right? Ask a digital native that question. Ask an 8-year-old girl, honey, you got a minute? I have a serious question to ask you. So she takes off her earphones. She puts the TV on mute. She takes her hands away from the laptop and stops testing and go, what, Daddy? How are you dealing with that information overload thing? And she won't know what you're talking about because it's what her reality is. This is just it. We all know this. We've experienced it. I've had teenagers. You challenge them. They were, right? I'm futurist in residence and guest lecturer at the Ringling College of Art and Design in Sarasota. I'll talk about that in a minute. But they can do it all the time. I know that if they have their laptops open, some of them are checking out while they're talking to me, but a lot of them aren't. They can totally hear it, right? So these are the one, this is the first generation that's going to evidence this shift in consciousness. Imagine being a 3-year-old on an iPad today. How is that 3-year-old on an iPad going to show up as a 20-year-old? Boggles the mind. Friend of mine, one of the smartest guys I know, he was in computer animation in the early 90s. He goes by the name of Andy Robot now. He has all the patents on robots. He's got a 2.5-year-old. And he says, if I give him a magazine, he tears it to shreds. Because you may have all seen the video, right? You know, you open a magazine, full-page ad, give it to a 2-year-old, and they go like this. They try and open up the ad with their hands because that's what they're used to, right? So these generations, I got to keep moving fast, but these are the generations. This is the one I look at because this is the one, there'll be a digital native president in the 2040s in this country. I'm just going to put this one thing up here. The shift age will be the age when all the economic, cultural, and social gender definitions from our first 3 ages of history will be changed. No question about it. That is a title. By the way, you know, time out. I always talk about transformation. I walk my talk. This book that is here in print form today As a futurist, I said, I got to do it differently. I had a visionary publisher over in Naperville, largest woman-owned publisher in the country. She said, you will give me cover. I said, you'll be a visionary publisher. My book came out in ebook form January 1st. It came out in a print book form January 15th. But by December 31st, you could buy any part of my book in 12 mini ebooks. The first one had parts 1 and part 2 for $4.99. Part 3 was, $2.99. And then the last 10 in this section were 99 cents. So there's a 99-cent book called The Ascendancy of Women. Why? Because why should you buy the whole book? You can sample it. Just buy what you want. When you go to iTunes, do you buy the album? No, you buy the song. So this whole concept of you gotta buy the whole book. Anybody other than me buy the Al Gore book? I mean, my God. It's like, I keep trying to get into it, but it's such a, it's a book, it's a doorstop, right? Or think of, anybody read Gladwell's Outliers? What? Okay, so you're reading it in class. The concept that it's, he's a bestseller. But Gladwell kind of does a great job of packaging concepts, right? The concept that stuck with me with Outliers is the 10,000 hours to mastery, right? So what if he put that out as a 99-cent ebook? So in the future, books, he might sell 10,000 copies and a chapter will sell 50,000. Just like in iTunes, right? The hit song sells more. So it's a great book. But, and then there was the other thing about when you were born, right? Those are the two things that kept with me, but he had a lot of concepts. But think about, so back to this. All you women in the room, this is your time. Imagine a 50-year arc between 1975, for you, 1975 and 2025. So we're 3/4 of the way through that. 1975, women's lib, feminism into the workplace, Title IX, beginning of the information age. 2025, full blossom towards the end of the shift age. We're 3/4 of the way through that. All of the gender change, social, economic, cultural, political, that has occurred in the first 38 years will be easily replicated in the next 12. 60% of all undergraduates in developed countries of the world are women. 55% of all people who get master's degrees or professional degrees in the developed countries of the world are women. 51% of the people who get PhDs in the developed countries of the world are women. If there's any correlation to higher ed, and you wouldn't be in this room if you didn't believe it, this is a future success. So all the directional signs are there. And the threshold or the transition was the information age, because for that, physical strength counted for something in the workplace. Physical strength meant something in the family. Physical strength, I can run, I can run to the next valley to get the message. The origin of the marathon. So that got equalized in the information age, and now it's eviscerated in the shift age. So this is significant. Okay, I'm going to run through these real quick. In my book, I have two categories: emerging transformative technologies and downstream emerging transform. I'm going to go through these real quickly, and if you don't understand them, just make the note and I'll describe it. First of all, the cloud. Everything's going to the cloud, right? Everything is in the cloud. Means increasing collaboration. It means less physical need for stuff. It means you can do lots of things that you couldn't do before. I can download a book in 5 seconds from the cloud to my iPhone. Mobile computing, I already talked about. The consumerization of technology, okay, that's what this is. Remember, when I graduated from college and I went to work at the University of Chicago, the IBM 360, 165, it was so expensive that only universities, big companies, and governments could afford it. Now you can get the same thing for 99 cents. And there are infinite number of chief technology officers around the world that are really sick of this, right? Because all of a sudden the CEO goes, my wife can do all these cool things on the apps. Why can't we do it on our computer, right? So the innovation in technology is now at the consumer. It used to be at the big institutions. It's the consumer, or the young people. How old was Jobs when he started Apple? How old was Zuckerberg when he started Facebook, right? And it was facing the consumer. Augmented reality. Okay, so the very beginnings of this are the Google Glass. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it, right? So it's a glass. Augmented reality is taking the screen reality input and merging it with the physical reality. So if I'm looking at this building with a Google Glass, I'll get all the information about Governor State University coming in. This will transform every aspect of human society. Think about 8-year-old kids going on a field trip wearing glasses. How much more will they learn? Think about being a mechanic. It'll change education. 2015, you're a mechanic, right? And you used to be working on Chevys, but now you lost your job, the Chevy dealership closed, and you got Hondas, but they're much more complicated. How do you do it? You put on the glasses. Oh, change the spark plug. Just look in. Here's how you do it in a Honda, right? You don't need to go back to school and get retrained. You just put on the Google Glass. You just put on the glasses. Or anything. Truly automatic automobiles. Who needs a driver? I mean, what is the reason for accidents? Human error. Drunk. Texting. The car doesn't get in the accident. The human gets in the accident. So here you have Google. Remember, shouldn't step outside their core competency of search. 250,000 miles, no accidents. 2 states have now made it legal. So by 2020, just think how much more productive we can be. We don't have to pay attention to what you're doing, So continuing with the emerging second page, 3D printing and custom manufacturing. Everybody's read about this. If not, start reading about it. The concept at the highest level is that I believe that there's going to be a rebirth of manufacturing in the United States of America. Because manufacturing is defined the way Henry Ford defined it 100 years ago. Mass production. Now it's going to be custom production, doing one-offs at the same cost as mass. That's why in 15 years, China's not going to know what hit them. Every innovation consultant I know is over in China, right? Just like every efficiency expert I know is in hospitals, right? Inefficient, non-innovative, right? So this is just the beginning. Nanotechnology, okay? So a nanometer is a billionth of a meter. A human hair is 50,000 nanometers in diameter, roughly, depending on the hair size, right? So at the nanometer level, we're making things. There was a guy, a doctor who was interviewed a couple of weeks ago, who's got a little thing the size of a grain of sand that gets put into the bloodstream, and it just keeps traveling around the bloodstream, and it gets monitored by an app on a smartphone. And the minute this nanobot detects any cell having broken away from the heart muscle, it sends out an alert, because that is a precursor to a heart attack. So think about stuff like that. It's just amazing what's going to happen. Bionics in robotics. Bionics, clearly. Up until Valentine's Day, I always talked about Oscar Pistorius. Now everybody knows who he is. But in 2008, this guy, this sprinter, made the South African track team, and he had no legs. He was born without fibula, right? He made the team, but he was disqualified by the International Olympic Committee from competing in the Beijing Olympics because not having legs gave him an unfair advantage over those that did. Think about that. I got glasses, right? In 3 years, there will be completely artificial eyeballs, 10-year guarantee, 20/20 vision. Initially, it's going to be really expensive, but think about that. Or robotics are just going to be amazing. Anything that can be measured or defined that humans can do, a robot can do. So right now, we're in this transition of legacy thinking, right? Oh, robots are taking jobs away. No. Robots are freeing humanity up from these mundane jobs to do creative jobs or connective jobs or higher consciousness, rather than having to do this job that a robot could do, right? Voice recognition and translation software. Anybody have an iPhone 4S with Siri? Okay, hi Siri, I did a book on education. I went into school boards. Our school's really cool. We just don't teach Spanish and French. We teach Mandarin. And my reaction is, why? By 2014, you won't need to learn a foreign language. I'm in Shanghai. Hey, could you tell me where the Apple store is? Apple. Okay, fine, thank you. Right? Why do you think Ray Kurzweil just went to work full-time for Google? Because he's led the way on this. The only reason you will need to learn a foreign language by 2020 is because it's been proven to develop certain thinking processes of the brain, neuroscience. But if you don't care about it, you don't need to learn a foreign language. You got this. And also, this is going to start to change. Remember, there's a debate going on in the K through 12. Do we still teach cursive because everybody's keyboarding? In 5 years, do we teach keyboarding because everybody's doing talk, right? brainwave computer interface. This is here now. This is the next thing. For $300, okay, so 10 years ago it was thought that the brainwaves could not be measured because the skull was too thick. Now it can be. So you can buy for $300, a company called Motive, there's many of them, 16 sensors on your head, right? So it programs the way I think. David, think about lifting a heavy object. So I think about lifting a heavy object. It maps that as the flat line. I go over to, I won't go all the way over because of the speaker. I go over to the laptop, and there's a Japanese sensei avatar who says, David, see the boulder? Lift it. I think lift, and it lifts. In 2009, I spoke to 2 CEOs of major computer game. Who's a gamer? She is. She's a hardcore gamer, I can tell. Okay. Okay, so that's really surprising. How few? Okay. It's okay to say it in a university, all right? Because gaming gives you many more skills that you need than not have gaming. But so anyway, so 2009, 2 CEOs said to me, one 5 years and one 6 years, okay, I'm going to keep going really forward. I'm sorry. I'll speed it up. By 5 years or 6 years, the controller will go away. So like think of Call of Duty 4, you know, whatever it is, our first shooter game. So Call of Duty 16 comes out in 2016. And you put on the headset and you think, pull trigger, move gun to the right, jump up. So there'll be 2 gamers playing a game with the headsets on. No hand-eye dexterity. Think about the concentration it will take to do that. You're 2 16-year-old guys doing it, right? And they're playing a game, and one guy thinks of his girlfriend last night. Boom! Oh, you're dead. Sorry, right? So that's why I think that. So think about 10 years of that type of training of concentration into this new consciousness. Okay. So transformative technologies in the future. I'm going to go real fast. Atmospheric cleansing. Right now we have this low-level conversation about energy. Well, this energy puts less CO2 into the atmosphere than this one does. Well, this is the holy grail. There is initial successful stuff done on this. You know, in a wind turbine, so the wind is going through, so the atmosphere is going through the turbine. In the front of the blades, there's this material that's taking CO2 out of the oxygen. So think of an atmospheric vacuum cleaner. This will be real. Holographic communications device. You know, there's a whole lot of truth in Star Trek and Star Wars, right? You know, that's the next thing. Right now we have video. We're going to have 3-dimensional interactions on devices this big in 5 or 6 years. 2nd-gen augmented reality. This is where it gets really interesting, right? Because it will be so developed that our neurological memory will think we experience. If what cools you out after a hard day's work is half an hour at the beach, you can do it. And you won't be sure whether you did it or not, because the neurological reality will be so powerful. The beauty of this is amazing. It will change everything. The danger in it, of course, is this, you know, the matrix, but this is one of those things that politicians are going to slow down, because it's going to come up against all these you know, ancient religious things about what is real and what is moral. And you know, so it's going to be that. It's going to be the legacy thinking belief systems that are going to slow this one down. Collective consciousness interface. I don't know what it's going to look like. It might be just some kind of like a World War I pilot thing with sensors initially, so that you put it in and you can communicate with the collective consciousness. Again, I'm going fast. Energy. 21st century. We have to create the 21st century, forget 20th century. A systematic global view. As Buckminster Fuller said, we have to look at the future of humanity in a systems approach. Retrofitting 20th century, I talked about that higher concept. 21st century breakthroughs, basically the first one coming is how to store variable energy. We're doing that okay, but very expensively. You know, when the wind's not blowing, how do you store it? When it's a very windy day, how do you store it for when it's not blowing, right? So medicine and health, medical miracles, amazing. Dynamic flows, there's 9 dynamic flows. I don't have the time to go into it. It's in the book that I wrote. Here's the way to think about healthcare reform. In a cocktail conversation, oh, you wrote a book about the future of healthcare reform? Tell me what it is. So if you round the 18% that healthcare is of the GDP up to 20%, everything that I've been talking about that you've been nodding your heads about, searchability, transparency, connectability, price competition, that's in the 80% of the GDP, it's just going to come to the 20%. Raise your hand in this room if you have ever gone online to do a price-related search before buying a major purchase, car, flat-screen TV. Pretty much everybody. Okay. Raise your hand if you've gone online to do the same thing before a major medical procedure or an implant. You have. You've done price competitive research with outcomes. Where'd you do it?
Oh, for the dental implants.
To dental implant. Okay, so that's a low-level one. But what is going to happen? So basically, I love talking to people who think they're really conservative, which means they shouldn't like Obamacare, because all healthcare reform is bringing the free market, price competition, transparency, digitization of all records to healthcare. Something we expect. I mean, anybody go, say, bank in Bank America or Chase, right, one of those big banks, and you go into your neighborhood bank and they know you, right? Oh, hi, how you doing, David? Oh, I'm fine. Oh, I'm across town and I go into a Chase bank here and I want to do a transaction. I'm sorry, I don't know you. Fill out a clipboard. Sound familiar? Right? That's what you have to do when you go to they can't just call up your record. Healthcare to health management. That's the title in this book, right? Because we're going, you've heard the phrase, ounce of prevention, pound of cure. In the United States of America, we have a pound of cure healthcare system. Now we're going to move to ounce of prevention. Doctors are going to get paid to keep patients healthy. It is a defeat if any of their patients get to the hospital, the most expensive place to dispense health care. Okay? So by 2020, we're going to be managing our health. We're going to have apps. I just got this, I wear bracelets, obviously. I got this bracelet, right? It maps how many steps I take in a day and my deep sleep versus my REM sleep at night. You know, so I can measure that. That's just elemental, but much more significant than that. Education, transformation at all levels. Preschool, for the first time we have these digital labs. Someone's going to come into kindergarten with 4 years of digital experience. Think about that, right? Or we know so much more about the development of the brain from the day of birth to age 5. Think, as I quote a good friend of mine who was Secretary of Education in South Carolina he said, if we could take all that we've learned about neuroscience in the development of an early child brain and bring it into preschool education, we could change this country in a generation. It's available. K through 12, it's already gone through transformation. I can answer questions on that. Higher ed, I've been on the media recently saying it's the next big bubble in the United States of America. First there was tech, then there was real estate, now there's higher ed. They all have the same metrics. Too much debt on the buyer side, too much debt on the seller side, overpriced property people can't afford, questionable outcomes relative to that property, and an outdated delivery system that's 300 years old. Creativity, it's the #1 quality that CEOs want. Don't talk to me about STEM, That's what the politicians think is the cool buzzword. I'm sorry, STEM happened in 1957 when Sputnik went up, right? It's creativity. The 20th century, left brain century. 21st century, right brain century. Right brain is creativity, left brain is rational thinking. Knowledge to learning. The knowledge society is gone. You have to always keep learning because it's changing so fast. So we're in a learning society. If you're not learning, you're falling behind. The arts, real quickly, technology, connectivity, augmented reality will change it. It's going to leave the confines. It's not going to be in the theater. It's going to be outside the theater as well. Interactive, much more interactive. There are theater companies now that have places where people can tweet because it promotes what's going on and people can interact online with what's happening on stage. Physical and digital split. I'm going to put all these up. This is where brand and marketing is going to change. Looking back, it was based on monolithic institutional media. Looking forward, it's based on personalized media. Institutional to personal, it's about me. Conscious capitalism. Anybody know Panera Cares? I went in there yesterday in a Panera, and I had been in there for 6 months, and I walk in, and it's a non-profit. They ring it up, so I bought a salad. It was $8.97. And they don't take the money. There's a contribution bowl thing, and you put in what you can pay. This is the suggested contribution. No tax, right? and you put the money in. And then I'm sitting down at dinner and people saying, can I clear your plates? And I'm looking at these people. So if you can't afford to buy a meal, you get one free meal a week. And if you need more than that, you can come in and work for an hour for free. Yes, right. Wow. Now, I teach kids in, as I said, in Ringling, Tom's shoes. Buy a pair of shoes goes to the third world. This is going to be the millennials and the digital natives will drive this. What are you doing for the planet? Why should I buy your product? Is the first question. Memes. Okay, real quickly. Anybody, a meme is an idea that courses through real quickly, right? Through all of society. So memes to movement. The classic case is Occupy Wall Street. The single most significant thing that has occurred in human history in the last 3 years. Why? Because 75 people on September 17th went to one park in New York City. 75 people, one park, one city. 1 month later, actually, October 15th, 100,000 people, 2,560 odd cities, 83 countries occupied. 1 month because of the connectivity. Never happened in human history. That was a meme. Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street's dead, but what did it do 1 year later? It completely defined the context of the presidential campaign, the 99 one. That was the conversation, right? I want to raise the tax on the 1% so that you 99 vote for me. Oh, cool, right? So Occupy Wall Street defined the 2012 presidential election. That was a meme to a movement. So future of intellectual property, it's the wealth of the shift age, what we think about, okay? In the agricultural age, it was land. In the industrial age, it was production. In the information age, it was technology. It's thought and ideas that create wealth. And it will become more, I read about it, more liquid and more transaction. IP will go global rather than country by country by country. New business models. And the era of big data. I'm going to talk about, again, I knew I was going to be running out of time. This is one of the most, this will affect everything. It's the third mapping of humanity. It is nothing less than an explosion of data. There was 1.8 zettabytes of data created by the human species in 2010. 1.8 zettabytes, okay? By 2040, it's 12,000. So you think there's been an information explosion. You haven't seen anything. It's because of all these smart things talking to one another, right? So first level of mapping was, what does this continent look like? Second level of mapping was, how do we traverse it? Oh, the road map, right? The third level is mapping our behavior. This is real-time sociology and real-time anthropology. We don't have to go, well, the last data we have is 2010. No, the last data we have is yesterday. What did humanity do yesterday, right? I've been doing a lot of interviews recently. This is the single greatest job explosion capability in the United States. 1 to 2 million jobs. They don't exist now. Every major corporation is going to have a chief data officer. So retirement obviously is going to change because we all live older, live longer, right? That's the legacy thinking we see in Europe. We don't want the retirement age to go above 60. Well, it was put in place when the average life expectancy was 65. You have 5 years and then you die. Now that you're living to 82, it doesn't work. I'm sorry. Got to change this, right? Consumerism, I'm just going to put these all up real quickly. Consumerism is going to become much more conscious and much more about sustainability, investing in economics. It's going to be highly volatile for the next 3 or 4 years. I think there's going to be, everything's going to be highly volatile because there's so much change going on. The old models, should we invest in that or should we invest in the new models? I think by 2018, it'll be done. It'll be a 10-year bull market from 2018 on. Politics are going to completely change. I just want to say this. Washington is broken, and you all know it. The only two things I will say to you, number one, is we are the longest currently running democracy on the planet, and we are the only democracy that is a two-party system. Every other democracy has more than 2 parties. We have one choice more than a dictatorship, and duopoly operates the same way as a monopoly in a marketplace. It's one of the reasons I think we haven't had a woman president. Every single woman president in the world comes from a multi-party system. Marriage, of course, has completely changed. When the President of the United States talks about gay marriage in an inauguration, game over. It's like in the last 6 months, it's been the tipping point, right? Even the conservative Republicans, I better not miss this train. I'm almost going to miss it, right? Birth rates, fortunately, are going down dramatically. 2.1 is the replacement rate in the population, 2.1 children per every childbearing woman. 100 years ago, we were 5. We fell below 2 until Hispanic immigration. The whole world now is down to 2.3. So 1950 to 2050 was this one big bubble that's over. So from 2050 on, we're going to flatline. And if we don't do some of the stuff I'm talking about, it's going to go way down. Cities and urbanization. 70% of everybody's going to live in an urban city. There's so much I can talk about this. I don't have time. So let me just shift age power. It used to be power is control. I want to control you. I want to control this country. I want to control this relationship. I want to control this economy. The millennials and the digital natives are going to have influence power. I don't want to control you, but I want to influence the way the world thinks for the next 2 weeks. So control power will stick around, but influence power is on ascendancy. Intellectual property, think about this concept. So I was writing my book, An Idea's Time's Come, right? There's nothing more powerful than Idea's Time's Come. Victor Hugo. So I went and I looked up in Wikipedia, and Victor Hugo did live entirely in the 19th century, in the 1800s, which means he lived before the telegraph. So when he talks about the power of an idea whose time has come, he's talking about the 1 to 10% of those literate enough who happen to have come on a book to read an idea. So the power of an idea whose time has come, and when Victor Hugo said that, was centuries or at the least decades. An idea whose time has come, Occupy Wall Street around the world in a month. So an idea whose time has come is going to have immediate power. It's really a profound concept if you think it through. So, geopolitical global stage, nation states at time transition. We're going to move to global government, new global issues-based entities. Golden age of Africa, 2030 to 2040. It's going to explode. Why? Because it's the last place for cheap production. It keeps going downstream. Also, they got a lot of people. Second most populous continent, and also a lot of sunshine. Unprecedented mass migration beyond anything in history. Why? Because we can be connected. I can go work 6 months in this country, 6 months in this country, and stay connected on a daily basis with my loved ones. And everything's in the cloud anyway. So we are in the shift age, 20, 30 years, so mid-20s to 2030. Remember the 3 forces and the 5 contexts. If you take nothing else away from this, remember the 3 forces and the 5 contexts, and it will be on TV, so you can go look at it. Then you can have a way to look at what is going on in the world, and it really is. Welcome to the greatest age of human transformation in history. So I want to thank you. That's my information. Thank you very much. Sorry I talked a lot of it. Thank you.